Hey everyone, yeah, so wow, 1 million subscribers. I really can't believe it still. It's unbelievable. I'm gonna be rambling a lot during this, so I apologize, but yeah. I started this channel around 8 years ago, just releasing a video about some creepy pizza delivery stories. I remember re-recording that video like so many times until I felt that it was finally good enough to post, and it's funny listening back to just how much my voice has changed over the years. But the video ended up getting maybe, I don't know, 10 views or something like that. And I was honestly kind of super discouraged and just ended up not posting any more videos after that for a while. So it wasn't until around, I think, 6 months later when I was back home from college on summer break that I decided to start posting videos again and give it a try. I figured why not, I might as well try this out again for the remainder of the summer and see if things go anywhere with it. And surprisingly it did. The first video that started to really get some traction on the channel was called Mr. Banana. So if you've been here for a while, you probably recognize it, but it's still one of the craziest stories that I think I've ever read. It's about a man like literally wanting to turn into a banana. It's crazy. If you haven't checked it out yet, you definitely should. But with that video kind of taking off a little bit, the channel started to gain some subscribers here and there, and it motivated me to continue on with it. So summer came and went, and I went back off to college, and it was kind of difficult to keep up with it and find time between balancing classes and just everything that comes with that. But I was able to find time and make it work. It was definitely a ton of late nights and early mornings just trying to rush videos out so that you guys would all have stories to listen to. After I graduated from college, I decided to start posting every single day, and the channel really seemed to take off during that time. I definitely took pride in posting a video every single day for all those years, and I still do now, even though I might take a couple days off every once in a while now. But seriously, thank you to every single person that has ever watched one of the videos, commented, liked, all that stuff. Taking time out of your day to listen to my voice is still amazing to me, and I appreciate it so much. And thank you so much to all the talented and fantastic authors. Life is Strange Me Too, Kyle Harrison, Jordan Group, Dominic Eagle, Bad Andy the Rad, Blair Daniels, First Breath, Darkly Gathers, World Away Tweety, Odd Cat Lady, Sunhead Prime, Horror Junkie 123, Googly Eyes 93, JL Goodwin, Christian Wallace, Michael Kelso, Tobias Wade, Ren Ryder, Squishy Cabbage, Richard Saxon, Zach Frost, Mag Voynich, Nick Boddick, G Trip 14, Mike Jesus, 02321, Young Seti, Weird Bryce Guy, Saturdead, Rick and Dick and Dockin 123, Luke Hemingway, Mr. Mills 45, and so many more. They are the ones that have written the spine-tingling and frightening tales that you all enjoy every day, and literally this channel would not be possible without any of them. And finally, the moment that you've all probably been waiting for a while. I think this is probably as good a time as ever to finally do a face reveal for the channel. Yeah, the voice behind it. Well, here we go. And I couldn't forget my two favorite assistant storytellers. Sorry guys, but I had to do it. But yes, let's get into today's story, Anomaly. This story definitely has that old school creepypasta feel, and I felt that it was appropriate for today's video. And please, if you enjoy this one, go check out the author's collection of other short stories which are linked in the description below. So without further ado, let's drift further into Mr. Creep's mind. Greetings. I guess I should say up front that I'm new here. So be patient with me as I don't know all the rules or etiquette or whatnot. A friend of mine linked me to this board after I told him the story and showed him the materials that I'm about to share with you. He thinks that some of you will appreciate it. But to be honest, from where I'm sitting, this site seems more like a haven for idiots than a serious paranormal image board. Whatever, I'm motivated to share this stuff and need to do so anonymously, for reasons which will become clear. Technically, I'll be breaking the law, but if I understand how this place works, this thread will disappear in a day or so anyway. Here's the deal. I'm a production editor at a small independent publisher in the US. I won't say which or where, so don't ask, as I would like to keep my job. The pay isn't that great, but it's an easy gig, and I like the people that I work with. A lot of what we publish are what you would call coffee table books, the kind that people flip through when they're bored, but almost nobody ever reads it cover to cover. Bland pictorial histories of certain cities or states that sell well in regional gift shops, the occasional book of maps or a biography. A few museums outsource their gallery catalogs to us, that kind of thing. The work is boring, but it's steady and we get enough jobs and our books make enough money to stay afloat, which is a lot more than most small presses can say these days. Because we've been around for a while, our name is somewhat known to history buffs and people who think they're an expert on such and such town in nowhere, Idaho, or some esoteric topic nobody really cares about. We get a lot of unsolicited manuscripts from people that really shouldn't be writing books, and unsolicited CDs full of photographs from people that shouldn't be taking pictures. Because we're small and don't have a separate acquisitions editor position, the job of going through this slush pile gets passed around the office. Very rarely somebody will find something worth pursuing and pitch it to the rest of us, but our senior editor or publisher gets the final say. For the last 9 months, I've been working more or less nonstop on a book that everybody at the office was pretty excited about. Our copy editor found it during his turn with the pile. An old guy I won't name had contacted us out of the blue and offered us the chance to publish this rare archival photo collection, provided that we treat the subject matter with the respect and seriousness that he felt it deserved. To use his term and what was going to be the book's title, the photos were all anomalies. That is to say, they depicted something out of the ordinary or otherwise inexplicable, something that usually had an equally interesting story to go along with it. Most of them were from the first half of the 20th century. Like I said, it's not the kind of thing that we normally publish, but the few samples the guy sent in with his pitch letter were pretty compelling, and once we had seen the rest of them, heard a few of the stories, and realized that none of these pictures were widely known, we knew that we had something that would get people's attention. The format was going to be simple and classy, with a lot of white space and breathing room. Each photo would appear as a high-quality print on the right-hand page, followed by a blank left-hand page, and then a couple paragraphs to caption each photo on the following right-hand page. From the very beginning, the guy was a nightmare to work with, and the job took forever because he refused to send in more than one document at a time. He would send me certified mail, I would get it, scan it, and mail it back certified, and only then would he send the next one. He seemed to think that he had an extremely valuable collection, and was hugely paranoid about losing it, so he only risked one of them at a time. In the end, we spent so much money on mailing costs that it would have been cheaper to fly me to where the old guy had lived with a scanner and a laptop. We were maybe a third of the way through the production process when this guy pulled the rug out from under us. Somebody had offered him a large sum of money for the photos, way more than we were offering for the book rights, on the condition that our book got canned and the photos stayed out of the public eye. We demanded that he come in for a face-to-face and try to reason with him and cater to his pride and desire for scholarly acclaim. And for a few days it seemed like it had worked. But when he got back home, he flip-flopped again and started cursing out me and my senior editor on the phone, demanding that we shelve the book. He hired a lawyer who came up with some BS to void his contract, and then he threatened us with a lawsuit that would bankrupt us if we went ahead with the project and lost. To add insult to injury, the law firm sent this annoying little IT guy to our office to make sure that the materials were wiped from our computers, because the vast majority of it existed on my machine, and I had spent literally months of my life on the project. I felt and still feel violated and bitter about the whole thing. Somebody should benefit from all that work, hence my reasons for coming here. Unfortunately, I don't have the high-resolution scans that I made of the photos, but I did keep working drafts of the original captions and 14 medium-res placeholder thumbnails that Quark created as I was laying out the original version of the book. And don't ask me why we're still using Quark. It's what we know and what we paid for a long time ago. I'm not supposed to, but I occasionally take home the working Quark files to tweak on my home machine. The full file with the full-res images embedded gets way too large and unwieldy to bring home with me. Most of the time I'm just experimenting with fonts and layout options anyway, so I don't embed the images until the end. Anyway, after all this went down, I discovered that I had a working file on my home machine of what we had done so far. So I printed to PDF and then stripped the text and images from that PDF file. You folks will be the beneficiaries of that. Just to be clear, I don't claim anything with regards to the veracity and provenance of these photos. I'm not here to convince you that they're real. I'm just putting them out there because I think they deserve to be seen and not hidden in some rich prick's private collection. Photo 1 of 14. The Collinwood Fire. This is the last known photo taken inside the Lakeview School in Collinwood, Ohio, before it was consumed by fire on March 4th, 1908, killing 172 students, 2 teachers, and 1 rescuer. The fire started when a ceiling joist ignited from a nearby steam pipe. Flames blocked escape routes, leading to panic and a stampede that trapped a large number of victims in a stairwell, where they were cooked alive. Additional casualties were incurred when burning students jumped from 2nd and 3rd story windows. Everyone in this photo perished, except for Mr. Olson, seated at the far right in the back row. The spectral artifacts in the photo remained unexplained. Photo 2 of 14. Charlie Noonan's last interview. Charlie Noonan was an amateur folklorist who traveled throughout the South and Southwestern United States during the early years of the 20th century, collecting tall tales and stories of the supernatural. According to his wife, Ellie, Charlie was told a story one day by an Oklahoma farmer about a strange woman who lived alone on an isolated property in the Panhandle. The farmer claimed the woman was not a woman at all but something else. Something that hid its true nature beneath a headscarf and was never seen without a large dog by its side. Noonan was apparently intrigued enough to try searching for the woman during one of his research road trips. He was never seen again. Ellie Noonan was later contacted by a Tulsa pawnbroker who remembered reading about her husband's disappearance in the papers, after finding his name engraved on a camera sold to him by an itinerant. The pawnbroker returned the camera and Mrs. Noonan had the film inside developed in the hopes of finding a clue as to his whereabouts. This was the only photo on the roll. Unfortunately, neither the location of the property nor the name of the farmer who told him the story was recorded in Noonan's notes. Photo 3 of 14. The Death of John Alstead. This prophetically torn photograph depicts a regimental color guard of the Union Army, 1 month before they marched into battle at Antietam, September 1862. The gentleman on the far right, named John Alstead, had the right side of his face and right arm blown off by cannon fire at the start of those hostilities. It is unknown exactly when the damage to the photo occurred. Photo 4 of 14. The Axeman of New Orleans. Edouard Martel was an unsuccessful French photographer and inventor who traveled throughout the United States during the first 2 decades of the 20th century, trying to drum up interest in investors for a device that added timer and automatic exposure features to Kodak's popular line of folding brownie cameras. During his travels, he took thousands of automated photos to test and refine his invention. Often he would wake up early, set up a hidden camera in an inconspicuous spot on the streets of whatever city he happened to be in, and then walk to a nearby cafe or bar so that he could capture candid scenes of daily life to remember his travels by. The best of these photos were selected for Martel's one and only gallery show in Paris in 1924. Unfortunately, Martel died penniless and unknown in 1955, and it was left to his daughter Jean to sort through the boxes and boxes of photos that he had left behind to see what should be kept and what should be discarded. During this process, she came across this photo taken in New Orleans on the morning of October 28, 1919, a few hours before Martel boarded a steamer ship and returned to France. It turns out that Martel hated motion blurs in his photographs because he thought they would reflect badly on the speed and accuracy of his lens mechanism. This prejudice made him cast aside and overlook what was probably the most important photo that he ever took. What makes this photo so special? The night before it was taken, the notorious and still unidentified serial killer known only as the Axeman of New Orleans had committed his last murder, hacking Mike Pepitone to death in his bedroom, and then fleeing the scene just as Pepitone's wife was discovering the body. Could this be him returning to his residence? It's impossible to say, but if it is, the image appears to belie the legend based on the shaky testimony of Pauline and Mary Bruno and prevailing prejudice of the time, that only a black man was capable of such savagery. Photo 5 of 14. The Grand Caverns Cryptids. This photo was taken in 1895 by an amateur spelunker or photographer named Orrin Jeffries while exploring an unmapped section of Grand Caverns in southwestern Virginia. At the time that it was taken, Jeffries was conducting photographic experiments using super long exposures to see if anything at all could be captured in the total absence of light, otherwise known as cave darkness. During one of these experiments, he heard something approach from the deeper recesses of the cave. Frightened, Jeffries abandoned his experiment and set off one of the blitzlicht flashes that he used for taking traditional photos underground. According to the report he later gave to a local newspaper, Jeffries saw 3 humanoid creatures staring at him from the shadows and took off running in the other direction, not stopping until he was topside. Several days later, he returned with 3 other men to retrieve his box camera. This is the image that was recorded on the film inside. Photo 6 of 14. The Harlow Twins. 1938, Evergreen Park, Illinois, just outside of Chicago. Billy and Stevie Harlow were riding in the front seat with their mother Tammy when their Ford sedan collided head-on with a Chrysler. During the collision, the car spun in such a way as to impact 2 additional vehicles. Tammy Harlow survived, but the boys were ejected through the windshield and killed instantly. A crime scene photographer from the local paper took this shot as a crew of volunteers worked frantically to free John Downing, the driver of the Chrysler. It appears that little Billy and Stevie stuck around to watch. Photo 7 of 14. The Sorensen Tragedy. The Sorensens were a Danish family who immigrated to the United States sometime between 1905 and 1906. They arrived with their eldest child, Anders, seen on the donkey, and settled on a farmstead in Missouri. 3 more children, Simone, Freek, and Mathild, center right and in the wagon respectively, soon followed. This photo, taken in 1916, captured all 4 of the children a few weeks before the tragedy. The 3 eldest kids were apparently playing fort in the hay barn and must have fallen asleep. Their father, Nicholas, drove a wooden hay sweep into the pile and dismembered all 3, in locations accurately suggested by the flaw in the photo. Mathild, the youngest, was inside the house with her mother at the time and not hurt. According to the son of a neighbor later interviewed by the author, the donkey later died in equally hideous fashion by getting its head caught in a barbed wire fence and nearly decapitating itself in a frenzy to get free. This final detail could not be corroborated. Photo 9 of 14. The Ghost of Sarah Eustace. Danvers State Hospital, formerly Danvers State Lunatic Asylum, was a Kirkbride-style psychiatric hospital built in 1874 on what was then an isolated site in rural Massachusetts. Like all Kirkbridge asylums, it was famous for its Gothic architecture and its use of now outdated medical techniques to treat insanity. Danvers is often cited as the birthplace for the prefrontal lobotomy. Danvers has several other claims to fame. It was the inspiration for the fictional Arkham Sanatorium that appeared in several stories by H.P. Lovecraft, and which in turn inspired the Arkham Asylum in the fictional Batman universe. It was also where the cult horror film Session 9 was filmed. That film put the vast network of tunnels beneath Danvers to good cinematic effect. It's no accident the filmmakers chose to use the tunnels, as rumors of their haunting had dogged Danvers for over 100 years. The most famous story concerns Sarah Eustace, a patient who escaped her ward in 1955 and snuck into the tunnel system. Despite multiple searches and a week-long lockdown of the asylum, Sarah was never seen again. It was assumed that she had died down there, lost, thirsty, and alone. A nurse at Danvers named Gail Malloy became obsessed with Sarah's story and spent many of her off hours searching the tunnels for her remains. Though she never found a body, she did snap this photo in late 1966, which suggests that Sarah Eustace walks the Danvers tunnels to this very day. Photo 10 of 14. The Stevenson family portrait. Who says that ghosts don't have a sense of humor? The Stevensons were a wealthy Boston family, proud of the industry and longevity with which most of the clan was blessed. This portrait, taken in 1945, was an effort to gather the oldest Stevensons together with one of the youngest. Amelia, in the center, aged 102, was granted the honor of a matriarch, while little Ophelia was the token child at 18 months. What the Stevensons did not realize until this photo was developed was that they had been joined that day by one of their deceased, James Pullum Stevenson, 1835 to 1932. Seated on the left, between his niece, Ginny, and his cousin Alfred, was easily identified by several of those present, and remembered fondly as a rascally uncle known for pranks and dirty jokes. Photo 11 of 14. The disappearance of Mrs. Yurnow. During her later years, Josephine Yurnow would take a walk every evening at dusk around her beloved neighborhood in Norwich, Connecticut. On November 12, 1935, she set out as usual and never returned. Extensive searches were conducted by a large team of volunteers and the police force, but no sign of her was ever found. 3 years later, Mrs. Yurnow was found squatting in front of a neighbor's house, without a mark on her body and in perfect health. When asked where she had been, Mrs. Yurnow was unable to understand the question. From her point of view, no time had passed. Against the advice of her neighbors and her doctor, she refused all medical treatment and resumed her life as if nothing had ever happened, including her nightly strolls. Another neighbor snapped this shot of her in the fall of 1938. Clouds of smoke from piles of burning leaves give it an appropriately eerie feel. On the same date in November 1940, 5 years after her initial disappearance, Mrs. Yurnow vanished again. This time, she was never seen again. Photo 12 of 14. The fate of Sally York. The 1912 threshing of little Sally York, aged 9, in the cotton loom of the North Fork Textile Mill was one of a handful of such accidents that helped legislators push through the Keating-Owen Act of 1916, the first child labor law in American history. From the time of the accident until the mill's closing 4 decades later, workers consistently complained of cold spots, strange noises, and sudden taps on the shoulder when nobody was near. The mill's foreman never paid these complaints any mind until this photograph surfaced in 1932. It was taken by a traveling photographer named Benny Johnson, who promptly sold it to the North Fork Gazette for an unprecedented $10. The mill had shut down for the Christmas holidays and it was empty at the time. The photo was later blamed for the closing of the mill, though the Great Depression was the most likely cause of that. Photo 13 of 14. Lily Palmer's eyes. Lily Palmer was not quite 4 when she experienced what her doctors would later call an acute onset of sensory hallucinations. This photo, taken by Lily's mother Annette on Halloween night 1952, purportedly captures the arrival of her disorder. Lily and her Filipino nanny were setting out for a round of trick-or-treating when the child suddenly screamed and began to claw at her eyes. It was some time before she was calm enough to speak, but when she asked what she saw, Lily repeatedly spoke about things crawling in her eyes. Several days later, while unsupervised in her bedroom, Lily punctured both of her eyes with one of her mother's knitting needles. After receiving medical treatment, she was evaluated and committed. She remained institutionalized for the rest of her life, first at Bellevue on the east side of Manhattan, and later at the Rockland Psychiatric Center in Orangeburg, where she remained until she died of a heart attack in March 2001. A call to one of her former caregivers at Rockland confirmed that Lily's episodes were most traumatic on and around Halloween night. But for the majority of her life, she could be heard begging and pleading with the staff to help her get these things out of her eyes. Photo 14 of 14. The Trinity Deception. This is one of these several famous photographs taken of the first ever nuclear detonation conducted by the U.S. Army on July 16, 1945, in the White Sands Proving Ground, located in the Jornada del Muerto Desert, about 35 miles southeast of Socorro, New Mexico. The setting off of this implosion-designed plutonium device, the same method used in the Fat Man device dropped on Nagasaki, ushered in the atomic age and the eventual arms race between the United States and Russia. Only a handful of people were aware that this photo was cropped before it was ever released to the public, and they are all now dead. One of them was the original photographer, who gave the author a copy of the original on the condition that it be kept out of the public eye until such a time that these citizens of the world could handle the ramifications of what it depicts. The author remains uncertain whether this criteria has been met, but given that he likely owns the last copy, he has decided his responsibility rests with the truth. The first Anomaly was posted to 4chan's X on 12/7/2012 and has been circulating the internet in one form or another ever since. Almost a year later, late October 2013, somebody calling themselves Benefactor X posted this curious follow-up, which was mostly derailed by jaded trolls with poor reading comprehension. As a result, it did not get nearly the same traction and has been largely forgotten. It is presented here for archival purposes and best experienced after reading the original. As with that material, I make no claims as to the provenance or veracity of any of what follows. I have some early Halloween presents for you, but first, a little backstory. Remember this thread. For those that weren't around, an Anon who worked as a production editor at a small publisher posted a series of rare photos from a book that he was compositing. The book got canceled when the old man providing the photos pulled the plug and sold his entire collection to someone else. The Anon was pissed about his wasted effort and shared all the photos and text that he had from a backup copy of the layout file. Besides the fascinating and all too rare OC that he provided, I was struck by something that Anon said while explaining why he felt the urge to share the material. Let's just say the comment hit home. There are all kinds of ways to get rich. Most involve hard work and the willingness to put your career above everything else. The funny thing about inheriting money from a distant relative is that it doesn't even seem real, because you didn't earn it with your own hands, or see it add up and compound month by month, year by year. Because it just magically shows up one day in your bank account, it tends to feel like dream money. So a little while ago I began to ask myself, what does a person do with dream money? Most of you have probably heard of Sotheby's, the venerable auction house founded in London but now headquartered in New York. They broker most of the famous art auctions that fetch millions. This is common knowledge. Lesser known are the thousands of private sales that they handle each year. When you want to sell or buy a valuable object, the last thing you want is everybody to know that you own it. Imagine what a resource it would be for thieves, so the vast majority of Sotheby's auctions are private. Often even the very fact of a sale is kept out of the public eye, and the pool of potential buyers is strictly controlled. In fact, their website has a preferred access section that is accessible by invitation only. Well, fortunately for me, I happen to have a preferred access account. I also have a taste for the macabre, hence my presence here. So imagine my surprise when I logged in at last week and saw what they had for sale under private auctions. Clearly, whoever bought the collection from the old guy was trying to make a huge profit by selling the photos piecemeal. Obviously, this isn't standard stuff for Sotheby's, but in October they sometimes have a themed string of private auctions. Last year, they had a 16th century grimoire cache of used torture implements from the Tower of London, among other things. The first thing that struck me was how overpriced they were. The second was that the collection included 30 photos all told, 16 more than in the original thread. The third thing I noticed was the complete lack of provenance for the collection. This is pretty strange for Sotheby's, so I wrote them an email about it. A few hours later, I got this reply. In the meantime, I took screenshots of each photo and copy-pasted the backstories that they included to interested bidders. Like I said, the auction included 30 images all told. I won't bother duplicating the 14 original images from the first thread, which have been reliably archived elsewhere. But here are the 16 others, which as far as I know, X has never seen. Happy Halloween. Don't say that I never gave you anything. By the way, stick around after the show to see what's in the box. Photo 15. The Watchers at the Window. For years, guests staying in this room at the old Riverside Inn in Jenner, California had complained of feeling watched through the window. But it wasn't until 1964 when a San Francisco travel writer named Michael Irwin thought to set up a timed exposure that evidence of actual voyeurs was brought to light. Irwin lay on the mostly obscured bed in the foreground and read a book while his camera took a series of long exposures. When he showed this photo to the hotel owner, he was promptly asked to leave. 2 days later, the owner was dead by his own hand, and Irwin was left with a creepy picture and an unsolved mystery. The identities of the children remain unknown. Photo 16. Ida in the Archives. Tim Stewart had only been working at the Cumberland County Archives for a little over 2 months when he took this photo, which allegedly captures the ghost of Ida Clark, an undersized, misshapen child who was taken down there, defiled and murdered by her custodian uncle in 1953. In the afterlife, Ida evidently enjoys displacing objects and whispering in the ears of anybody caught alone in the archives. Turnover of the staff there had always been abnormally high, but rumors of this photo have made it almost impossible to keep employees for very long. Photo 17. The Cornfield Cannibal. When Francis Dodson turned 7 in 1960, his parents gave him a relatively inexpensive 35mm camera. The following summer, the three of them toured Iowa and Nebraska in a Chevy Apache pickup truck outfitted with an Alaskan camper shell. Fran liked to stay in the camper while his parents drove and take roll after roll of random shots out the back as they rode down the road. He took this one somewhere outside Dubuque. When the roll was developed and his parents saw the photo, they asked Fran what he had seen. He allegedly replied, "A dead black man holding a white man's head by the hair." Who or what the photo actually depicts has never been conclusively determined. Photo 18. What Killed Jane Doe. Drag marks in the leaves and mud led Ohio hunter Earl Guthrie to this bizarre scene in 1959. He found the young, still unidentified female victim dead pale and withered, as if, in his own words, something had drank her dry. Her arms were embedded deeply into the soft earth beneath her and pinned back at an extreme angle. Her face was turned away and contorted as if in pain or terror. Arriving first, a local photographer aiding the police took one quick shot before an overwhelming sense of dread drove him back to the gravel road where he had parked. State police arrived several minutes later, but when they returned to the scene, the body was gone. Pareidolia is certainly in play, but one can't help but see in the bushes behind this poor woman some demonic mirror of whatever it was that took her. Photo 19. The Minister's Secret. In life, Reverend Alan Yarborough was a respected minister in the small village of Wickford, Rhode Island. In death, he became a regular spirit visitor to these seances held by Anne-Marie Cotilliano, a local medium. During his manifestations, Yarborough, speaking through Cotilliano, would often make cryptic references to a series of secret crimes that he had committed, for which he was never accused or punished. Concrete details were sketchy and hard to verify, but the things he said were horrifying and seemed to involve the ritual dismemberment of several unnamed local children, whom Yarborough had evidently abducted and kept imprisoned in a forgotten sub-basement of St. Paul's Episcopal. The photo seen here was the result of an experiment conducted during one of the last of these manifestations. Cotilliano invoked Yarborough as usual, and then at a prearranged signal, two attendees tied back the curtains so that a third could take a photo in natural lighting. Opinions differ on whether the distorted visage reflects the torture of the damned or the ecstasy of bloodletting. Photo 20. The Sallow Man. This photo of a typical turn-of-the-century London tenement was taken by an amateur photographer named Michael Oliphant using a box camera in 1911. He was drawn to this particular set of flats by persistent rumors that the building was haunted by a tall, sallow man who had a terrible habit of leaning over and staring at tenants while they slept, only to scare the living daylights out of them when they awoke. Oliphant himself saw nothing on that day, but he later recalled inexplicably losing his balance while taking the shot, as if someone or something had collided with him while rushing past. Photo 21. The Ghoul in the Graveyard. One would think that if ghosts exist and linger in the places where their bodies lie, getting a photo of one in a graveyard should be a relatively easy undertaking. But this shot is one of a few examples that has not been explained or debunked. It was taken by Ellery Reese while visiting her father's grave in Arlington Cemetery in March of 1949. If Mrs. Reese was trying to perpetuate a hoax, it was a strangely subtle one, because she never showed the photograph to anyone. In fact, she never had the chance. Her son Paul found the roll of film on a bedside table while clearing the house after her death. Photo 22. Brody's Wraith. Jackson Brody was a rising fourth-year medical student at the University of Pennsylvania when he decided to take a semester off and travel Southern Europe. According to his mother, Brody was suffering from nervous exhaustion and the persistent delusion of being haunted by the wraith, or a spirit of an old female cadaver that he had dissected. Fearing an imminent breakdown, he hoped some time touring the Mediterranean would lift his spirits, so to speak. Letters and postcards sent home to his mother seemed to suggest that his condition was greatly improving when he decided to extend his stay by 2 weeks and see some of northern Africa. He left Spain by boat in the fall of 1921, stopped in Gibraltar for a night, and then went on to Tangiers. Unfortunately, his last letter home displayed a steep regression into madness. He claimed that the wraith had followed him and it was stalking him through the dark winding streets of that ancient city. He included this one blurry photo as proof. Exactly what befell Brody remains unknown, as all contact subsequently ceased and his body was never recovered. Photo 23. The Spirit Tribe. Dozens of documented massacres occurred during what later became known as the American Indian Wars, and most of those infamous sites now bear historical markers and official apologies from Uncle Sam. How many more remain undocumented and only recorded in the annals of the dead? It's unknown and will likely remain so. Unless, of course, more photographs surface like this one taken by Graham Wheeling in 1971 on BLM land near Kanab, Utah. Wheeling was camped out in a dry riverbed, pulling what he liked to call a cowboy weekend, when he noticed that a carpet of fog was rolling in. As fog is extremely rare in that water-challenged region, he figured he should try to photograph it. He set up his tripod and took a 2-minute exposure in low light. Only later in the dark room did he learn what he was really looking at. Photo 24. Forever Lost. Ernst and Rachel Tappig later admitted that they were necking when their daughters Lily and Hilda wandered away from the picnic blanket that they had spontaneously laid down near an old estate outside of Hornbach, Meinberg, in the Teutoburg forest. Exactly how long it took the Tappigs to realize their girls were gone remains in dispute, but this much is certain. They were wearing white jumpers over black turtlenecks when they disappeared. They were virtually inseparable, and their bodies were never found despite extensive searches. Lily and Hilda's case briefly became news again in 1957, 5 years after they went missing, when this photo came to light. It was taken by a Belgian naturalist named Frans Erlen, who claims he saw nothing moving through the forest that day. Photo 25. The Winged Thing. Unfortunately, almost nothing is known about this image. Who took it, when, what it depicts, why it is so overexposed. In early 1968, several months after the Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, a vintage silver print of it was mailed, without return address and in a plain yellow envelope with a heavyweight clasp, to the Special Collections Division of the New York Public Library. Experts there could find no evidence of doctoring, and thought the image itself was quite old, possibly from the 19th century. It remained there uncatalogued until the library sold off a small portion of its undesired holdings in the early 70s. From there, it passed through several hands until joining the present collection. Photo 26. The Phrygian Jinn. In northwestern Turkey lies a notoriously isolated and atmospheric region known as the Phrygian Highlands. Ancient rock-cut tombs and relatively modern graveyards sit side by side, essentially making the area one huge necropolis. When traveling through this haunted landscape, it is fairly common to experience something strange, but rarely as strange as what Frida Palermo encountered on September 5, 1956. Palermo was an Italian archaeologist specializing in Byzantine funerary sculpture. She was walking alone photographing an unpublished cemetery near Iazin when the air seemed to change and grow heavy, as if to portend a storm. She later described hearing a sound like wind across the mouths of 1,000 bottles, and then something became momentarily visible on the outcrop high above her, just long enough for her to grab this shot of what she subsequently dubbed the Phrygian Jinn. Photo 27. Still Life. Michael Evans was 15 and friendless in 1969 when he began wandering around town and taking photos of the abandoned houses and factories that were already beginning to swallow Detroit. He was fascinated by the swiftness with which nature could reclaim a man-made space, and especially liked to capture vines growing up walls. The images preceding this one on the roll suggest that is exactly what he was doing that fateful Saturday in April, before something caught his eye in the window above and he raised the lens to photograph it. How he ended up inside the house, what caused him to leave his camera behind, or why he didn't simply run away are questions that may never be answered. Photo 28. The torture of Tilly Jane. In the era before abortion was legalized in the United States, short of a straightened coat hanger, the only option for a woman who wanted to terminate one was to locate a doctor willing to do the job on the sly. Some of the doctors were good men and some were not. At least one was a psychotic sadist. We know this because Tilly Jane Pridduck told her best friend Alice where she was going and why on the night before her shackled and mutilated body was found in a Philadelphia basement. We also know this because most of her large intestine and the tips of both her breasts had been removed and left on the floor beneath her. The amount of blood at the scene, coupled with deep, clawing gouges in the brick walls, led the attending medical examiner to conclude these atrocities had been committed while Tilly Jane was still alive and conscious. 10 years later, in 1941, a group of feminist mediums held a seance in the basement in an attempt to summon Tilly Jane and learn the killer's identity. The latter goal was not achieved, but the former was, as this photo taken by one of the attendees makes disturbingly clear. Photo 29. The Goblin of Sulphur Fork. As far back as anybody living could remember, there had always been a legend of something not quite human living in the old abandoned house at the tail end of Sulphur Fork Trail near Wildsonville, Tennessee, where the road forks and peters off into dirt and brambles. It was a typical tall tale used to scare children, and a few adults paid the legend any mind, until this one blurry photo surfaced in the early 40s and forced the sheriff to level and burn the building to keep the peace. The whole episode is more than a shake of Brothers Grimm in it. Marla Jenkins, the teenage girl who took it, was evidently an odd thing, prone to telling elaborate lies, and there are many who think the photo was a hoax. But if so, Marla was hoaxing herself as well. She bought the burnt land on which that old house had stood with a small inheritance from her grandfather, built herself a ramshackle cabin, and lived there for the rest of her life. In time, a new legend arose around the strange old lady in the woods and the creature that she liked to ride naked in the moonlight. Photo 30. Nensha Akuma. 17-year-old Akiko Nakimura had been missing for nearly 2 months when her mother, Masami, finally gave up hope on the Tokyo police and turned to Daisuke Ezekiya, one of Japan's last remaining practitioners of Nensha, or projected thermography. Ezekiya also claimed to be a remote viewer, capable of finding missing persons with his mind, and would combine these talents to project what he saw onto Polaroids that theoretically would help locate them. Despite numerous attempts, this ghastly image was his only successful result. According to Ezekiya, the shining object is a mirror, used to deflect psychic intrusions, and the reason that his further attempts failed. According to Masami, the thing holding it is an Akuma, or a demon. When asked later whether the image had helped her locate her daughter, Masami was curt and blunt. "Yes," she said, "my daughter is in hell." So, at the start of this thread, I asked a question that probably seemed rhetorical. What do you do with dream money? If you're a normal person, the answer is obvious. You buy a dream for yourself or someone that you love. We do things a little differently here on X. So what did I do? I bought myself some nightmares. Andrew Harrington, Malcolm Black, Mark Norman, Damon McCory, Kathy McGuire, SWAT, Justin Fotenauer, Mina Lynn, Takio Zarilla, Sanjay Anthem, Sleepy Shroomy, Dragon Slayer 048, Richard French, Chris Eldridge, Jimmy Griffin, Shelley Bruno, Leon Knott, Ty Can't Play, That One Woodsman, Talamagara, Meek Asher, Die Screaming, Nelson Asada, MB Massacre 91, Rain, Big Country